What's going on, guys? This is just a quick review of the unique melody MEST. But first, I do have to give a shout out to Tyler from headphones.com for loaning these to me. He has a YouTube channel, which I will link below, where he regularly does live impressions. Yeah, the MEST. This is an IM that has been on my radar for quite some time, as it's been hyped to no end in the circles I regularly hang out in. Every time the MEST comes up, all I hear is MEST is best, MEST is best. So yeah, I had to hear it for myself, and here we are. This is a super interesting IM because it's using no less than 4 driver types. It's got a dynamic driver for the lows, 4 balanced armatures for the mid-range, a bone conduction driver for the, I think, high mids, and 2 electrostatic drivers for the highs. As for how this stacks up in practice, well, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I will throw up the frequency response on screen for reference, so that you guys know I'm not just spewing BS, I guess. Anyways, the overall tonality of the MEST is something between a W shape and a mild V shape. It doesn't really follow any sort of academic target curve, but it's definitely a well-tuned, balanced IM. Just be aware that it's not neutral, and it leans a little bit brighter. The MEST bass is good but not great. On the surface, it's fine with adequate texturing, dynamics, and a properly defined shelf, which I believe levels off at around 250 Hz or so. I guess my biggest nitpick then is that it's lacking in transient density, that characteristic richness which I would attribute to the best dynamic drivers. For example, the likes of which the Tia Trio and the Sony IER-01R exhibit. These limitations, at least for me, are most evident on deep, heavy drops in a lot of the EDM that I listen to. So Millennium, Seven Lions, Pharaoh, stuff like that. And I do find myself itching for a little bit more slap and a little bit more, just a little bit more depth to the way the hits are articulated. Now, you might think I'm nitpicking, but I will explain why this is important later. The mid-range of the MEST, though, is superb. It is a little leaner, more upper mid-range oriented, but the level of macro detail here is very impressive. And speaking of which, the MEST is a highly technical IM. It's on par with a lot of the top tier IMs I've heard for resolution, including the Empire Ears Odin, and quite frankly, it smacks my U12T in the upper mid-range where there's a noticeable dip on the U12T. Detail retrieval is superb as well, and I do wonder if this is partly to do with the MEST treble, which exhibits something of a 6K Hz peak. Generally, I am not a big fan of this type of dip, as it has a tendency to lend treble to a, I guess sort of a metallic grittiness, and the Sennheiser HD800S is a good example of that, at least to my ears. But yeah, I think it actually works here. Electric drivers, at least within the context of IMs, they typically have something of a softness to the way their transients are articulated. It's important to remember that the electric drivers that go into IMs are completely different from the electrostatic drivers that go into full-size headphones. And yeah, I think the 6K peak might lend a little extra spice, which would otherwise be missing, as the MEST does seem to roll off just a tiny bit in the utmost highest frequencies, but that's pretty common, honestly. Perhaps most notable about the MEST, though, is its imaging performance. I'm not quite sure if the MEST imaging exhibits the density needed to qualify the oft-misused buzzword holographic, but man, it is close. The MEST staging is also exceptionally wide with decent positional incisiveness, and it frequently feels like, or I guess you could say sounds like, instruments are out of head. Layering ability is likewise astounding to the point of which it's almost unnatural, a little bit too good at times. In the same vein though, I guess you could say I'm not exactly sold on the MEST. When you're mix and matching driver types, coherency is something that becomes increasingly important. Coherency, at least within the context of IMs, is indicative of the extent to which a listener is able to discern separate drivers and the frequencies they are producing. I hate to say it, but this is where the MEST draws the short end of the stick. If we go back to the bass response in the mid-range, the simple fact of the matter is that they do not match at all. The mid-range's decay lags slightly behind the attack, eliminating grain, or BA timbre, whatever you want to call it, and that's definitely a good thing, but the mid-range's transient attack also takes on something of an upward skew with very good speed. By contrast, the bass response is just too slow, too soft in the way it articulates notes, and this is why I called it good but also not great earlier. I guess you could say that the MEST shoots itself in the foot here by virtue of the mid-range simply being too resolving for its own good. Oh yeah, I also find the MEST macrodynamic ability to be inconsistent. When I play my usual test tracks like Sawano Hiroyuki's E of S, the MEST swings on the up, like those where the song explodes into loudness all of a sudden, are crazy dynamic. They are better than the U12T even, which is shocking. But on more subdued sections, on stuff like Radwimp's Grand Escape, the MEST takes on something of a floatiness, where it doesn't quite scale as low as it should. And when it comes to Amor's I can't remember the name of the track, but the MEST doesn't seem able to carry the weight or the density of these swings properly. It's just lacking in heaviness to the way it scales. Another instance of which the MEST sort of shoots itself in the foot is in its imaging performance. As I mentioned earlier, the MEST has a tendency to exaggerate the separation between instruments to the point of which it's almost unnatural. And to me, it almost feels like there's holes in the image being diffused at times. And this is in turn what makes me hesitate to call the MEST truly holographic. The end result is that when I listen to the MEST, there are very clear delineations to the sound which constantly just sort of nag at me, I guess you could say. Now, I'm sure that there are some people who are watching this who will think, holy cow, you are crazy pedantic and way too harsh. All I can really say is this is a $1,400 IM. That is a lot of money, especially for someone like my broke ass, and rest assured I will reserve the right to nitpick as much as I want to. With that being said, as for what I actually think about the MEST, I rather like it. For all my nitpicks, it's a good IM with a pleasing, flavorful tonal balance and some very unique intangibles. And if what I've described in this review sounds like your jam, then by all means, I'm happy to recommend it. While I may have dubbed it incoherent, clearly it works to some extent, as it's a very, very fun IM to listen to, and I will be sorry to see it go. As always, I hope you guys found this review informative. If you did, be sure to smash that like button and to subscribe for future content, as it really does help the channel grow. And peace out until next time.